So let's start. Well, we heard before, owners and investors are very important people or institutions for the reactivation of vacant buildings, but it's not only about them. There are also other public and private institutions that can ease the process for investors, for owners to reactivate their vacant buildings. So this can also be a goal to ensure or to inform, to exchange, or to and coordinate these stakeholders in support of the reactivation of vacant buildings. So what does this mean in terms of tasks? It means, first of all, when you're in charge of the reactivation of vacant buildings, define what needs to be coordinated in exchange with which stakeholder to be able to support the reactivation of vacant buildings. And then you should define and implement accordingly structures and procedures to ensure the cooperation and also the exchange of information between these stakeholders. And yeah, how could this work? What can be done? So to define needs to be coordinated, exchanged with stakeholders, first of all, you should start brainstorming. You can do it already also with other institutions together. So brainstorm, what are the necessary steps to reactivate a vacant building, and also what needs to be coordinated with which stakeholder along these steps. And you can see here now on the right some examples, what are potential coordination topics which could help them the reactivation of vacant buildings. One is the development and also the improvement of general policies which can support and ease the reactivation of vacant buildings. So here in particular, you should think about which are the relevant city departments, which certain tools can be of help, or which maybe could develop new tools. So this could be a relevant topic to work on and in support of the reactivation of vacant buildings. Also, ownership, you have to find out, but also ownership changes. So find out, for example, who will get this information as soon as ownership changes, and that this information can then gets also to you if you're in charge, but also maybe you get some certain information about ownership, which might be interesting for other city departments, that you can pass on this information. So also the building control tax department could be relevant institutions with which you can exchange about ownerships. Also, it could be that you exchange about the current situation, the needs of action for certain vacant buildings. So you might have some projects that you want to act on, and so it's not just you who can use push and pull factors to support the reactivation. So here find out if there are other departments and other institutions maybe can be of help and who are also interested in the situation of these vacant buildings. So it could be building control, it could be the development department, it could be also the preservation authority. So these could be also then institutions with whom you exchange in meetings and to see what each department can do in support of the reactivation of these buildings. For owners, always important is to get building permits when they would like to do something. This can really get a big challenge, in particular when you have to get permits from very different institutions. So here a topic could be, how could you ease this process? For example, maybe you can organize that there's just one institution, one organization to which all the documents are sent, or whom they can ask for what kind of documents they have to give in for the building permits. And then this, let's say, context, or they get in touch with all the other relevant departments to ensure that they discuss if this building can be given or what has to be adapted so that the building permit can be given. So also here a coordination of these different institutions which are relevant for building permits. At the very beginning, we talked also about the digital database for Turin monitoring. So here also a topic to coordinate with different stakeholders is to make sure that relevant data about vacant buildings which you would like to have comes directly into this information base, that this information is updated on a regular basis. So here also you might talk to the IT department and other relevant city departments which might can provide data which you're interested in, or maybe also they are interested in. So these are just some coordinate topics which could be relevant. So important is that for your local situation, to brainstorm what are the relevant coordination topics, and to give you further ideas about this, you can always take a look at our Altbau guidebook, which provides some further examples. So when you have this brainstorming, when you discuss certain potential coordination topics with other stakeholders, it's also important to sketch who at the moment is responsible for these topics, and also what are the current coordination exchange procedures, if there are any. Maybe there are also no one, this is also a result. So be aware how it works at the moment. And then comes the next step, where you should define and implement structures and procedures which will ease and ensure the cooperation and exchange between the stakeholders in support of the reactivation of vacant buildings. Which means you should brainstorm in consultation with the stakeholders you have identified how the current structures and procedures could be simplified, how they could be improved to ease the reactivation of the vacant buildings. And it also may that you come up then with new tools and new instruments to run your city. So in a way, this is your creative moment to improve the whole framework which you have in your city for the reactivation of vacant buildings. And many other partners do, or they intend to do, to set up like coordination exchange groups or also periodical thematic meetings to address particular issues of the stakeholders which are involved. And for example, in Villafranca, they have already a public housing council, but now they would like to turn it into a housing council which also involves private stakeholders. So I would like to open up and with public and private stakeholders to see what can be done to improve the situation of their vacant buildings. Others want to use a digital platform to exchange information and to communicate about vacant buildings and also relevant services, which can be done to improve not only the situation of the building, but also of the entire neighborhood. This is an example of Turin, which we will hear also now in a second. You can see on the slide we had proposed 3 city examples, but we will now just have 2. We have one example from the city of Chemnitz about their methods and experiences working with public and private stakeholders on that topic. Villafranca, unfortunately, Eugenia, she got sick over the end, and unfortunately she cannot participate today. So this will with no presentation about the Public Housing Council, which now they have opened up on this topic. So yeah, but maybe we can still get her presentation and then just resend it to all the participants in case you're interested in. And yeah, we have a digital platform, which the city, or it's not the city of Turin, it's an institution of the city. So they developed a digital platform to ensure the exchange, to work on the improvement of neighborhoods and the better use of vacant buildings. So with this, I would like to pass on to Chemnitz. This time not Martin, this time Frank Feuerbach is going to explain you about their approaches and their experiences with working with public and private stakeholders. So Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to show you about the context of Chemnitz we're talking about. I'm looking for my presentation. All right, we're talking about in this last session of today, we're talking about connecting and coordinating public and private stakeholders. You're already familiar with this slide, which you've seen earlier this morning. And it gives you a brief example of how diverse the stakeholders are who we are talking with. Owners and investors and potential users. We already heard about those in the sessions at the clock and the session just before this one. But this slide also gives you an idea how diverse the other stakeholders are. So why are we talking about the other stakeholders? They are contributors of information, and they give guidance to the housing agency. The other stakeholders are decision makers, they are gatekeepers, and they are influencers. So therefore, it is very important to work with all the stakeholders that are available in order to get our buildings refurbished. Different stakeholders, of course, have different roles, they have different responsibilities, and they have different interests, different expertise, and capacities. So therefore, it is, I would argue, important to actually analyze the stakeholders that are available to us, that are in the housing markets. They are active with the buildings and in the neighborhoods. And a method could be, of course, the Venn diagrams or the influence interest matrix, which you can see to the right of this slide. So by using the stakeholder analysis, we are able to determine strategies, how to work with the different stakeholders. But we don't only have to have different stakeholders, but we also have different issues and topics that need to be coordinated. So therefore, typical issues could be site visits, could be the exchange of contact information between owners and potential users, the initial consultation of either ones, publication in interesting events. If we want to organize those, of course, we want to reach many people as we can. So we also need our gatekeepers, for example, to do a very good PR. Publications is another special issue. So, and because we need to combine these issues that need the coordination with the different stakeholders, the agency has to tailor its communication and its work. And this is, of course, a learning by doing process. I mean, like, it's, I think it's, everybody will understand that this can't be done at once. So in an ideal world, I would say that everybody sits at a table. But we all know that there is some sort of an asymmetry in power and in interest among the different stakeholders, and that the stakeholders are very diverse. And we need to accept this asymmetry, and that makes it interesting also for the work of the housing agency. And in fact, the housing agency is a stakeholder itself, right? So in the real world, we do not sit at a table, but the city or the agency, the housing agency, needs to organize the integration of the different stakeholders. And even the public administration is very diverse. So we have different departments, for example, building control, urban development, monument protection, the finance department, maybe also public housing organization or an economic development organization. And from all these different departments within the city administration that have different goals and different colleagues with different approaches, we have to work with them together to just find the solutions and get the best communication out of it. So public administration, or inside the administration, of course, powers that can influence the development of the discourse. So, and besides this one-to-one contact between the housing agency and the colleagues at these different departments, there are two formats in Chemnitz that are crucial for the work of the housing agency. So one, it is the steering committee for the agency, and second, it is the working group Ruinous Buildings. And for example, the agency gets information about ownership and it spreads information about its working process. I will show that in detail again. So here you can see in this chart, you can see the different departments inside the city administration, and you imagine how diverse they are, that they have different goals and different takes on the situation. So here we have the steering committee, which consists of a representative from the urban building department and the department for building control. And the housing agency, as you might know already, is, in the case of Chemnitz, the housing agency is a public-private partnership. And
Frank, we just lost your presentation.
Open it again.
Re-show it.
Yes, it's okay. I think it's working. And in the steering group, both parties, so the housing agent, the people that were working for the housing agency, and department, especially the Department of Urban Regeneration, they meet and they come together.
At the moment, we cannot see your presentation.
But you can hear me, right?
Yes.
That's good. It's still working right now. I think I'm going to upload or to share the screen again. So the steering committee, which I was talking about, usually meets twice a year. And during these meetings, the agency, of course, shows its update and its work, or it gives an update on its work and about its accomplishments. And the departments, they give some thematic input, for example, about updates on particular concept they're working on, or different neighborhood developments they are interested in. So, and in this steering committee, the discussion is also focused around specific cases, and they try to formulate a common strategy for the future work, because the housing agency is also representing the city administration or the city of Chemnitz if they approach investors or owners. As a result, and Niels, I think that you cannot see you still cannot see my presentation. Maybe you can try to upload it, or you can try to share my presentation.
Yeah, just that.
And then I could go.
I will try turn. Just give me a second.
All right. So we are at slide 12 now.
Okay.
And you can see on this slide, you can see the results list, which is one of the most important ways the agency works together. The housing agency works together with the administration. In this results list, it is on the one hand, it is a documentation of the status each building the agency is working on, and on the other hand, it is the basis for the discussion between the departments and the agency. Next slide, please. Yes, and on this slide, you can see second important, the working group, which is called Ruinous Buildings. And in addition to the steering committee, there are also colleagues from the tax department. Slide, please. So this working group, Ruinous Buildings, meets roughly 4 times a year. And they are talking about specific ruinous buildings. Difference between the working group Ruinous Buildings and the steering committee. And they discuss about buildings in severe need of refurbishment. And it contains important information, of course, about it contains important information for the agency, what the public administration is doing. So, for example, that could include what kind of legal measures the public administration is planning. So legal measures include mandatory site visits or inspections, forced substitute measures, and also foreclosures. And if you are interested in foreclosures, I would like to tell that you can look at our good practice compilation, where you can find more information about legal tools to activate and reactivate buildings and flats in Germany. Next slide, please. So stakeholders from outside the public administrations include grant managers, and in Germany there are national state programs that support the rehabilitation of buildings, and those programs are very, very important. They are the most important way to rehab these old buildings with state money. And those grant managers I'm talking about, they are in charge of the application process for public money. So grant managers provide to the agency, those grant managers provide information on relevant developments and revitalisation processes. They give information on owners, and the agency provides, for example, information on relevant communication with owners. So it's always a direct and content-related communication between the grant managers and the agency. Next slide, please. We already talked about owners in the previous session, but on this slide you can see the variety of proactive communication that is needed and that is out there for you in your everyday work. So all kind of communication channels are needed if you want to successfully talk to owners and convince them in rehabbing or selling the property. So there are letters, there are phone calls, emails, Facebook, WhatsApp, and so on and so on. So this also contributes to the detective work Martin Norbert was talking about earlier. Next slide, please. We also talked about potential investors and users. For example, potential investors and users give the agency information about their plans and intentions, and the agency transmits maybe contacts of other stakeholders, or maybe they organize site visits. So next slide, please. Another important stakeholder for us to coordinate our communication with and the strategies the housing agency is working on is the so-called cooperative housing project, which is new. The project is organized the same way like our housing agency. It is in public-private partnership, which means that private consultants that are paid by the city administrations offer services, and in that case they offer services predominantly to groups of people that want to cooperatively take over a building, maybe a building they are already living in, or maybe a building they are interested in. And both services, the cooperative housing project as well as the housing agency, they really need to work hand in hand. And I think that this proved out to be very successful in the last months. So there's a viable information exchange in support of each other. Next slide, please. If we are talking about experts and stakeholders, this group is of course very, very diverse, and this slide gives you a little idea of who is belonging to this group. So mostly there is a direct peer-to-peer communication needed by email, by phone calls, but also you would try to meet and speak to these people during public events like fairs or maybe webinars like today. And of course the goal is, if we try to exchange our knowledge with them, is to access their expertise and to raise the awareness of the opportunities of rehabilitation, and and to get their support, to gain their support. During URBACT, we were able to cooperate with a research institution. In fact, we cooperated with the University of Mittweida, and they designed and conducted an evaluation in order to test existing structures and to identify coordinating issues we should work on in the future. Next slide, please. So the challenges they evaluated, or the challenges revealed that the agency has not always a very clear image. So, or the people we spoke to didn't always have a clear image who the agency, the housing agency was, and what its services it provides. So therefore, in the future, we think that we need to strengthen the profile of the agency. So We need to communicate the success of the agency. That must be further emphasized, and the self-image of the agency must be developed too. And expand the subsidy consultancy doesn't mean that we need to build more knowledge or know-how about these grants, but it is more important for the agency to share the contact information and to show the expertise inside the administration and of the grant managers. And extend public relations. That is very important for us. So we were talking about continuous developing a brochure about the agency, and which could clearly formulate the image, and it could also provide good practices we can showcase. Create new platforms for exchange. Means that we also want to work together with owner associations, so not only with owners of particular buildings, but also with the association of those owners in respect. Next slide, please. What have we learned? What are our lessons learned? I would argue that redoing the stakeholder analysis is helpful every once in a while, because the stakeholder analysis helps us to understand the changes and the developments of the housing stock and the real estate market. That is very important, especially if you work in this field for a couple of years. Stakeholder-oriented communication means always tailored tools and methods for the different topics, for different partners, for the different cases, etc. And I would argue that only if you have a clear model for the coordination of stakeholders, you can actually evaluate it. So evaluating and monitoring does not mean extra work, but it is a precondition, I will say, that the agency and its services are up to date. Next slide, please. Second last. This is another example for monitoring. I already talked about the results list. On the next slide, you can see a so-called content log. Next slide, please. That was about the tasks. And then in the results list, in the contact log, it is basically a database that collects all the work that is centered around specific buildings. Last slide, I am to make you aware of the fact that we always are dealing with very sensitive information, processing personal information and sharing, for example, contacts should always follow the principles of data protection, of course. The staff of the agency needs to be trained, I think. And in the case of Chemnitz, this is working very well. I just want to raise your awareness about this fact. And I think that there are standards observed, and in order to distinguish how and with whom what kind of data and information can be shared. So this also should also be included maybe in the very first power interest matrix of the stakeholders. So whom can you talk about what? Okay, thank you very much for.
Now, thank you very much, Frank, for the information how you are cooperating and coordinating your stakeholders in the city in support of the reactivation of vacant buildings. So now I would like to invite Giulietta to inform how they want to do this in the future using a digital platform that developed within the BAU Transfer Network. Giulietta, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'll try to share my presentation. Okay. Do you see it?
Yeah, it's there.
Yes. Oh. So, okay. So, I'll start just with a few words about what is Torino Urban Lab, who we are, what we do. So we are an urban agency, working in Torino. Our founding members are the City of Torino and a private bank foundation, the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation. And what do? We try to share the knowledge about what's happening in the city, about urban transformation. So we collect data and information, and we try to make information and data the most accessible for everybody. So we have a public place where people can meet and visit exhibitions and participate in workshops and meetings when it will be already possible again, and generally talk about urban issues. So here at Urban Lab, we delve into policies, urban plans and projects, always looking at the local experience, but also to what's happening around us at an international level. Okay, so just also a few words to frame the context we're working, because we are in a city that was generally known as the Fiat company town, and here you can find some data about that can show you how we changed in more or less about 25 years. So you can see that in the 60s and the 70s, when Torino knew its golden age about talking about manufacturing production, our population raised 1,200,000 people, while today we are a shrinking city because we raise almost 900,000 people. And while in the 60s, the greater part of the population was employed in manufacturing, and only, as you can see, the 7% were employees in managers. Today, the structure of the city has been radically turned upside down. In fact, today, only the 24% of the population works in manufacturing, and the greatest part of people living in Torino or using Torino works in the service sector. One of the principal outcomes of this great transformation has been the heritage that the city had to deal with. That is, the over 10 million square meters of industrial areas that, starting from the 80s, have been emptied. And until now, the city succeeded in adapting and reusing almost the 6 million square meters of abandoned areas. So talking about reactivation of vacant buildings, if Torino worked at the reactivation of its ancient historic center immediately at the beginning of this great transformation, because working on the transformation of the historical center was the tool to redefine the identity and the image of the city. Today, we have to deal with the reactivation of buildings that are located at the borders of the city. That is the suburbs that originated from the massive immigration of people coming from the northeastern and south Italy between the 50s and the 70s to work in Fiat factories. Now all these, a lot of these buildings that were built in that period are getting emptied because of the city, as I said before, changed radically, and with the city, all it's a society, and the society suffered many economic consequences of this deep crisis. And you see here synthesized the main issues of this change and the outcomes that the city is trying to face today. That is the depopulation of houses and loss of tenants, the population that is always and always older, and the crisis of local business activities, but at the same time, a growing demand for new forms of affordable housing. We have a high housing need that is expressed from a different kind of population that now are living in the city. At the same time, we have many stakeholders that are working at reactivating this built heritage, and at the same time working at giving an answer, giving a solution to these housing needs. So when we started working at the BAU Transfer Network, we analyzed our context, our situation, and we found that already a variegated geography of many stakeholders are already working at different pieces of reactivation of vacant building together with the housing needs that a huge part of population is fasting now. But at the same time, all these different stakeholders aren't, let's say, linked in an explicit network. So they do a lot of things. They are many and different, starting from banks, foundations that have a huge role in the a huge role in the transformation of the city, and today also are an important part for giving the resources to continue the transformation, but also the third sector that is that here in Torino has a long and fruitful tradition. In the city administration itself, and so forth, in the universities, and so forth and so on. So what we found, just talking with these stakeholders and confronting ourselves in different meetings we had in these 2 years, we found that all these stakeholders and we together needed a place where to meet, where to collect information, share information, and also share possible solutions to the needs the stakeholders have and the needs that the city itself express, talking about reactivation or housing demand. So, what we thought after all these meetings was, we as a urban lab can offer ourselves as a hub for this network, because we can work at least on 3 different levels of coordination, and also as a body that can can offer its resources to enhance the network and put in contact all the different stakeholders working together at the same issues. So we, as I said before, we are a place with a physical spaces where people can meet, and so to continue our mission in a way, but also we can also offer our work, our resources to stakeholders, to talk together and to find possible solution, engaging local communities and all different actors working on the territory. And so to find together, to discuss issues and find solution and work together at different projects. And one of the tools that can be a useful tool to put together all these resources and synergies is can be a digital platform. A digital platform that can gather together all the special information that we can get from our stakeholders to describe the territory, and so to give to the citizen and to everyone who is interested in such issues maps, that is cartographies where the different phenomena that can be social, economical, and so forth and so on are represented, and so easily and maybe more immediately comprehensible to everyone as a as a common tool, as a common ground where to share different opinions and suggestions. So what we are always more and more convinced in the power of maps, as you can see also if you want to give a look to our digital platform that is called Metropolitan Geographies. It's available in our physical headquarters in Torino, but also on the web. And this platform gathers, as I was saying before, together different analysis that we were able to do thanks to the support of the different stakeholders that worked and work with us at the description of the city and of the description of its problems and also its opportunities, in order to offer, as I said before, a tool to better understand the current situation and to better design possible policies and projects for the city. On this way, one of the main outcomes of the works that we made with our stakeholders through the activity of mapping and inventory has been the construction of a digital platform that is also part of the Metropolitan Geographies platform, dedicated to the services to housing in the city. So we can offer a set of maps and indicators to offer the possibility to give a survey for the assessment of focused policies addressing temporary or housing or co-housing or social housing issue. So how is this housing services map? It's again a public platform that gathers all the data that stakeholder gave us that is dedicated to social housing solution and all the different services that one can find on the territory near the housing, these different housing, social housing or different housing solution, but also it is a tool to evaluate, to assess the presence or the lack of local services to housing in order to, again, design better policies or to design to pinpoint places where the stakeholders can decide where to invest for giving the city new housing solutions. And so how it works, this platform is categorized through different issues. You can see here the different features from the local conditions, so the residential assets, eviction, given in forms of maps, but also diagrams. And so all the public housing and its distribution on the territory, the social housing, the social aid structures, all these accessibility infrastructures, public spaces, so parks and playgrounds and so forth and so on, and all the small services to citizens. This is a project that is coordinated by Urban Lab that has been possible thanks to the strong support of our local stakeholders that has given us data and information. And that our final goal is to make this platform a real working tool for all the stakeholders that are working at the housing issue. That is an issue that is strictly linked to the issue of vacant buildings and their need to be reactivated. This platform will be soon available on a dedicated application and also physically in Torino Urban Lab. Okay, for everything you want to know more, I'll be at your disposal in our presenting series. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giulietta.